Well, Julie, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you on. We met really through Alzheimer's connections, and so just recently started to have some different conversations. And so thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
And it's crazy how complete strangers can find commonality, and sometimes in the most unfortunate circumstances. And ours happens to be through Alzheimer's, and so both of our moms have passed from Alzheimer's, and I was truly, truly sorry to hear that for you. And really would have just it's such a horrible disease for not just the individuals, but for the families to have to kind of go through as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your condolences. And I extend mine too as well. It's awful. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And so can you just maybe like, when was your mom first diagnosed with Alzheimer's? I know my mother was diagnosed right at the end of 2009, beginning of 2010.
Wow. So my mom was diagnosed in 2015.
Mm.
She had, we had never seen it as a family. We had never seen the illness before. We were fortunate enough to not have it on either side, my dad's or my mom's. And so it was completely new to us. I was one of those people who, I guess, blissfully thought that it was just memory loss, and that's all that Alzheimer's disease entailed. And so so long story short, that's a long way of saying that we didn't know to recognize the symptoms.
Of
So
course,
she
yeah.
had been having some puzzle or some troubling symptoms where she was an avid quilter. You can see her quilt in the background. One of them that she made. Yeah, purple, my favorite color. And so she had been quilting in retirement. She'd taken up and she'd gotten quite good at it. And my father had said, she lived with my dad. My parents were married for over 50 years. So my father had started to say to my brother, my sister, and I, your mother's needing more help with quilting. And there were some things that happened to her. Like, she was a volunteer reading on a radio show to the vision impaired when she retired. Yeah, she's a volunteer.
That's awesome.
And I know she was a wonderful person. Wonderful. So she was in the middle. She had told us, it was very scary to her in the middle of reading. She all of a sudden looked at the page and the words just didn't make sense. And she had never before had anything like that happening. So she knew it was something serious. Another time she had vividly recalled pumping gas, she was pumping gas, and she was as able as they came when it comes to, getting around in life without assistance. And she's very independent. And she said she was pumping gas, and all of a sudden she didn't know how to pump gas anymore. And so there were those signs. And, I think that we all knew that something was wrong. But she was really the center of my world, my sister's world, my brother's world, my dad's world. None of us really could envision life without her. We depended on her for everything. So I think that we all kind of were just like, we didn't even want to think that something could happen to our mother like that. And so the diagnosis
it's such a kind of a crazy experience, because I remember, like, we didn't even talk about it with my mother. Like, she really, I think that she was nervous and scared about it, and so she never really talked about it. And then I can't even imagine to have that conversation with your mom. Like, it's I can't even imagine what it is like for the person on the other side, like all of a sudden starting to kind of feel this way, or get fuzzy and not understand what's happening when 85% of the day goes on without a hitch, right? Like, and that was one of the things that I couldn't even understand. Some days it was like my mother could just do everything as normal, and then she didn't know how to turn the TV on. And it was just mind blowing. Like, I just didn't understand it. I felt like I was in Groundhog Day sometimes.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's really common with people who are showing the early signs of it. You want to think that it's anything but Alzheimer's or another dementia, and that certainly happened with my family. We kind of clung to the hope that it was just stress, because she was one of those nervous, as am I, one of those nervous people in life. So we thought that maybe her stress was just getting. We wanted to believe anything other than Alzheimer's. So
Yeah,
it ended up being Alzheimer's, and her official diagnosis was in 2015, October of 2015. But the signs started, probably the year leading up to that. And in
sure.
June, she had gotten her PCP at the time gave her just a general dementia diagnosis, which and kind of sent her home. And I'm not knocking her PCP, because I think that that's actually really the norm. When someone is showing the signs of
It
dementia.
is the norm, but we were sent home with like, okay, she has, early onset dementia or just dementia, and because it really wasn't quite early onset at the time, but we'll see you in 6 months. And it's just like, okay, well, what do I do with
Now
this
what do we do? Yeah.
information? Like, are
Mhm.
you kidding me? Like,
Exactly.
there's nothing else
Exactly.
that you're gonna give me but this? Like, I don't even know what this means. I've never heard of this
Exactly.
before. Yeah, no, it was
Yeah.
such a frustrating time. But luckily, I'm sure like I found the Alzheimer's Association through that process, which I then became, obviously, and I'm still a big advocate, but I became part of a group that really helped me through a transition in a time when I really needed it.
Yeah. I can't say enough good things about the Alzheimer's Association. They did the same, through the early, especially through the early stages of her illness, where it was, you just don't know, as you said. Sometimes I'd wake up, I'd look at what was going on. I remember my mom all of a sudden didn't know how to use her toothbrush. And I
Hmm.
was like, is this like, I'm looking, it sounds so cliche, but I'm like looking around for cameras. I'm like, this can't be, it can't be, and another time she all of a sudden, and the things that happen, they first of all, they never stop, and they just keep getting worse, but
Yeah.
they kind of sneak up on you, because one second, my mom is taking her medications, and everything's fine, she knows how to do it. And then another time, I remember I had taken her to the White Mountains to go on this dinner train ride, because when she was diagnosed, I was really lucky that my dad and I were her co-caregivers,
Hmm.
so she
Hmm.
lived at home, and I used to joke that I was her cruise director, because I would just take her, and we'd like paint the town red together, and just go
Well,
on
that's
various
yeah,
excursions.
even so I was working full time, in the very, very beginning, I wasn't at the house, where afterwards I was working from home, but every weekend we would just kind of go out and do errands, and she just loved being in the car and having the air, and so
Yes,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and so we would just do all these little errands. We'd go out to breakfast, and then we would go do our errands for the day, and then kind of go everything. And she was just happy as
yeah,
can be, just
yeah.
sitting in the car, listening to music, going out and doing errands and stuff like that. It was fun.
Yeah, same with my mom, and you laugh, like you probably, like, probably people from the outside would look at us having this conversation and be like, what do you mean doing errands is fun? But it is fun when you're, someone you love that closely starts to become limited in the things that they can do, that you start to have fun doing seemingly insignificant things,
Yeah,
like going to
like
the
whatever you
grocery store
can.
or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly. Like
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
was kind of going out. And I remember just even in the very beginning going to the grocery store, because I would take my mom everywhere, but she would tap people on the shoulder and start having
Yeah.
a conversation. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, excuse me, but then afterwards I was just like, listen, this is just what it is. I'm not going to make an excuse for my mom having Alzheimer's, because she has
Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, I'm just going to politely let somebody know. But I stopped feeling anxious about a situation, or I stopped feeling embarrassed about a situation, because she would just start talking to somebody that she thought that she knew. And it was just like, okay, well, people need to understand that this is what this disease is. And I don't want to, hide it from anybody either.
That absolutely agreed and understood. And I came to that same conclusion or approach myself for similar reasons. So you have experiences where I remember I had taken my mom to a yoga class and at the YMCA, and she had always loved yoga. Even back in the 70s, I vaguely remember her doing yoga. And so I was like, okay, I'll take her to yoga. And she was, there's an instructor and all the people in the room. And I look over and my mother is like facing the opposite direction. She's just kind of doing her own thing. And I was like, at first I was like, oh no, what now? What, I'm like inside, I'm like freaking out. And then I'm like, first of all, I'm in a yoga class at the YMCA in my hometown. We're not on Broadway, you know what I mean? And you kind of have to, I feel like you kind of have to talk yourself down from that ledge. And, I think that that's actually a huge part, that what you had just described to me is a huge part in contributing to ending the stigma around Alzheimer's and other dementias, because it's not, people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they're still there. They still have, just as much right to be out in the world, out and about as anyone else does,
having fun, doing all of those different things.
And it's
just
not, exactly. It's not, yes, it's tragic. Yes, it's one of the worst things that could ever happen to a person. But I never liked, and I get it, I understood. I was one of those people that just had no idea how to react or interact with someone that has visible dementia. But I think that, the more, as you said, the more the people who are caring for them can normalize it, I guess, and say, hey, this is, sorry, she's tapping you. That's it, and kind of like get people used to the fact that, because it's, the sad reality is that the incidence rates of the diseases are like rapidly increasing. So the sad reality is, people are going to have to get used to it pretty soon, because it's not, there's no cure. It's not stopping. And people are getting older. As a population, we're getting older. And when you get older, the chances, the likelihood that you'll get dementia increase. So like it or not, until there's a cure, there are going to be hopefully more people with dementia out in the world, not more people with dementia. I mean, out in the world and living their lives and not being ashamed and not having loved ones who are embarrassed. It's awful. Like that, I think the disease is hard enough that to have all this societal, BS that you have to like sift through, and the embarrassment, all the feelings that you just don't know how to process. It's hard enough, and the stigma around the illness, I think, is one of the things that is pretty tragic to me. I think that as a society, or I really do think as a society, we need to end that, because
well, we should help people, just because, our society is built around the world. It's fast paced, it's moving, and, but, so folks that don't necessarily fit that mold have to adapt, versus the world kind of adapting and making, things a little easier or more aware,
right? Or even just welcoming,
all of those, all
making
of those
it a little
things.
more friendly,
Yeah, 100%. And especially with Alzheimer's, because it's such an unknown, and people they don't understand it. So therefore it's like, and I'm happy to have these conversations, because I think that it allows for just people to then understand what is happening with somebody, and, maybe how to handle it. Because even just from my own experience, I mean, when my mother sometimes would get angry over a situation, I would try to reason with her. Okay, well, that doesn't work, because she doesn't see the same thing that I see. So stop reasoning with her, and take her to a different place. Just almost like, when a child is throwing a fit, you distract them, you kind of do what you need to do to help them see something differently. And a lot of times it's distracting. And I used to do the same thing for my mom. If she was upset about something, I remember that I would just be like, okay, well, I know music helps her kind of get out of whatever place it was. And so if my mother was ever angry, or we would be out and about, and something kind of irritated her or set her off or something along those lines, I'd throw in a little Tom Jones, and mom would be happy as a clam, dancing around, and so it's just understanding little things that we can do, obviously for individuals, but then also just with, with people out and about, you don't have to reason with anybody, but just almost like if you don't understand what somebody is saying, the typical just smile and nod, just smile and
Mm-hmm.
nod. Like that's all you
Yeah.
have to do. And then we'll be on our way and you can kind of go from there. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
so, I know you said you and your dad took care of your mom. My sister and I, my wife, there was a lot of people that contributed to taking care of my mom as well. How was that whole experience? Because it's such a devastating experience, right? To watch your parent slowly lose the ability to do things. And so you mourn that loss. And then you're also in a situation of caring for somebody that has a whole nother emotional kind of toll with it. How did you take care of yourself, or did you during that time of taking care of mom?
I did. As I said, with my father and I both being there around the clock, I say often he's from a very different generation, so I think that he, while the two, I think that my being able to split caregiving with him allowed my mother and certainly my father to have as normal a life as possible,
Hmm.
for as long as possible.
Yeah.
I don't think that I was in necessarily a typical caregiving role, because only because
Sure.
I had my dad, and I had my own apartment. That was one of the things, I guess, to answer your question. I made sure early on to take care of myself. I am one of those people who really always has, I think, always has believed in self
Good.
care.
Yeah.
Mostly because I don't like how I feel when I'm neglecting myself. I feel angry. I feel, you know, stressed, tired, overworked. And it's the anger that
Hmm.
I really want to stay away from, especially when I was caring for my mom, because there's really I don't there's really very little room for anger when you're caring for a dementia patient, because oftentimes the person will pick up your mood.
It's totally going to feed off of your energy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I luckily recognized early on, and I don't have any kids myself. You know what I mean? That's why
Mm.
when I say that my caregiving role, I, I understand and I appreciate the fact that I'm not the norm. You know what I mean?
Mm. Hmm.
Most people have their own families. My sister, my brother, they have their own families. They have, children. They have a lot of, certainly full-time jobs and that sort of thing. So I had, yes, I took very good care of myself, but I had that luxury, and I don't think that most
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Which
my
is
father
good.
and I almost, yeah, I was lucky. If you can ever be lucky with dementia, my mom was very lucky to have my dad and me both there. We kind of like tag teamed, and of course we butted heads a lot, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
With any kind of caregiving role, I imagine it's the
Sure.
same raising a child. The parents don't always agree.
Yeah.
That's what happens. So I really made sure. I initially I had tried to I live in the Boston area full time, and I had originally tried to just stay with my parents and live there as much as I possibly could, just to make it easier on everyone, and certainly to save money for myself, because I wasn't working. I decided to not
Hmm.
to take time off of my career, and zero
Yeah.
income. So that's a big, huge concern.
It's
It's a
it's a
big
lot.
pressure. It's a big weight. It's a huge weight to carry, because everyone around you, thinks you're crazy and wonders what you're doing, and what do your mother wouldn't want this all. I've heard everything. When it comes to why would you put your life on hold to take care of your mother.
But why not? Like it's only a
Right? I
short amount
know.
of time.
Yeah,
I can
it
always
was.
make
I
more
know.
money. Like
Yeah,
but I
exactly.
can't get this time back. I can't get this
Yeah,
experience back with her.
yeah,
I can never
yeah,
give her this level of care. And
yeah,
so yeah, I feel like I did the exact same thing with my career, but I'm blessed for all of it. I'm
yeah,
grateful to have been able to still work, but not necessarily in the same capacity, but still, still work and give that care to my mom. And, it becomes almost poetic, right?
Yeah,
Because
yes, certainly.
I became very just appreciative of the fact that, you know, I could give her the same thing and the same comfort and the same level of care that she gave me when I didn't have the ability to care for myself. And now that she doesn't have the ability to care for herself, you know, it was a privilege to be able to give her that care and that comfort and that level of security that, you know, not everyone gets. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, with when I was living, I tried, as I said, I tried to live with my parents, and that didn't last very long because it's
Yeah.
a lot.
It is a lot.
I'm up there in years. I'm not a
Well,
teenager, and
become,
living with my
we're both
parents.
adults, and now,
Yeah,
you and your dad have
living
just
on the
different
couch. Yeah,
versions of different stuff.
yeah,
And yeah, like this
yeah.
isn't what yeah.
Yeah, yes. But then I look back and I think there that was the right, because sometimes I'd feel guilty. I'd think like, okay, well,
No, it's
I
probably the
should,
right decision for
I
your
think
dad to
so.
have,
Yes, yeah,
his own
yes,
space and not, you
yes,
know what I mean? And not feel like
I
his whole
do.
world was torn upside down. And
And he has a
it was good.
supervisor there, like, everything he does,
Yeah.
scolding him or telling him that's
And it
not,
was
yeah,
good for your mental health too, I'm sure, to just be
absolutely,
able
yeah.
to take a break and to
Yeah,
move away. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. And that's, that goes back to the self-care thing. I did make sure, I tried really hard if I ever did get really sad or mad, because it's an illness that elicits a lot, of anger
Oh
and
my
sadness,
gosh. And
so,
frustration and
oh yeah, yeah,
resentment
yeah,
and like
yeah,
yeah, 100%. I went through them all because it
yeah,
was
yeah.
so, you know, but
Oh, it's awful. It's tragic.
and
Yeah.
and I'm certainly glad. I love, so I've been certainly a big advocate on the Alzheimer's Association. It stopped after mom passed because I did a lot of kind of soul searching. I needed some time to figure out who I was. And now I've gotten back into more fundraising, and I'm going to be doing some other things. But I was thrilled to then see you start to do more advocacy, and you've just recently joined a few years ago, right? Like with the Alzheimer's Association, and I know you're a big advocate and kind of doing everything that you can to share that. So how did going through this experience then kind of help you say, okay, well, I want to be this advocate? Because a lot of people just kind of say, I went through the experience and that's it. And, I don't really want to, kind of, go through it. And I understand it's a lot of emotion, a lot of pain and all of those
Mhm.
things. How did you then kind of decide that you wanted to, um, um, continue to fight this fight?
After, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I agree that, it's more common to just want to, walk away, leave it in the past, and, don't ever have to think about it again, because it's that devastating. And I completely get that. I get it. And I appreciate, people who do that. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. So for me, I think that the more I cared for my mom for 3 years, and the more I thought about it and realized how fortunate my mom and I were to, to have each other, and to have, be able to spend, have, like you said, having a blast going to the grocery store, I, I started to think about the people that didn't have that,
Hmm.
and that had to, whether, like, what would my dad have done if he didn't have my sister, my brother, and I? What would my parents have done? And what about, like, the people who don't have anyone, and people who would love to have the luxury of taking care of their mom, but they can't because they have, their own, kids, or they
Hmm.
have a job, or that, they don't have the money, or whatever the case may be. Because, sadly, there are really no resources. I think people think that there are a lot of caregiver resources for people
There's
taking
not.
care of. There are not. There's no money. There's no,
Mhm.
really, there's very, very little.
Unless you have long-term care insurance,
Yes,
like
yes,
it's a financial burden that I don't
yeah.
wish upon anybody because it's
No,
hard.
yeah, huge. Yeah, absolutely. So once I started to step away from myself and my mom, I started to think about the other victims. And I think what sealed it for me was it being wanting to stay involved after my mother passed away, was seeing memory care units.
Mm.
My mom had a hospital stay, and she was had to be discharged into rehab. And after that, she was just very, very weak and frail and couldn't be sent home. So we had to, she went into a memory care unit for a short while before she passed away. And looking at them, or when I was looking at the different ones that are available, and, seeing and talking to the staff that works there, and what I know about staff at nursing homes and assisted living facilities are they're generally grossly underpaid, overworked, not appreciated, especially with dementia patients. As you said, there sometimes people can get angry. They can be abused. The patient themselves can be abusive, and I started to talk to the people who worked at the nursing homes, and I was like, well, asked about the other residents, like, why does no one visit? And they'd tell me, most of the residents didn't get any visitors at all.
Not a lot of visitors, and and there are in the places. I mean, they do a great job taking care of the needs of people, and there's some great ones. I know Beth does an amazing job, and she's a huge advocate, and not only just in her facility, but kind of town support. But the reality is that there's only so many people to do so much work, and and while they keep everyone safe and comfortable and all of those other things, it's still a lonely, it can be a lonely time for people.
Yeah.
Yes, there's other people around, but even when my mother became non-communicative and couldn't have any of that, she had a comfort with me that was just there. She would hold my hand. I would walk in the room and her eyes would light up. So that there was still that connection. And it's hard. It's some people have to do it, and it's understandable, but it's a hard place for everyone to be at.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that to answer your question is why I made the decision to stay involved is really for the people that can't be involved, the ones that lost their voice, the people affected by dementia and Alzheimer's themselves, that don't have that voice to advocate for themselves. They're really defenseless. And it's like, well, who if not me? It sounds cheesy, but like, if not me, then who is going to advocate for people and families who are affected? And I had just we had a congressional meeting with, as part of the work that I do with the Alzheimer's Association's impact movement. It's the advocacy work. We had a meeting with our local congressman, and one of the things I wanted to impart on his office is that there aren't a lot of advocates for Alzheimer's and other dementias, not because we don't care, not because we don't think it's important, but because we're exhausted. When we lose our loved ones, and we just kind of are like, what just happened? Trying to make sense of the world, trying to understand what we just went through, and
that's where some people don't want to relive that anymore.
Exactly.
And that's why they don't want to continue to tell their story. And then there's just those ones that want to continue to tell their story. But it is equally, it's equally as tough always talking about it. It's not
it is. And I don't want to. It's not something I think that if it ever comes across as me wanting to keep reliving this, it's certainly not the case. Don't, not at all. I don't. I wish I could just leave it behind me, but I just feel compelled to. I've always been like an root for the underdog kind of person. I feel compelled to help the people who can't, the victims who can't advocate for themselves, and for a family who is just so that doesn't want to deal with it. I don't think that if it's not, that's not the right way to put it. That wants to try to move forward with their lives.
Absolutely. And
I get that.
And not stay in that space 100%.
Totally. And I see, I can say that even though it doesn't seem like there are a ton of really vocal advocates, anyone that I've ever encountered who's ever seen it or gone through it is always, willing to say, I hear you, I understand you, thank you. So appreciative for anything that anyone else does. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not like for people who and I'm sure I'll be that person too at some point, you know, if I decide that, okay, I've done all I can, I'm going to focus on other things in my life. I think that I always get a huge sense of gratitude from the other caregivers, the other daughters, sons who have gone through it or are going through it. There's such a huge appreciation that even if someone isn't taking an active role, we're all in this. The Alzheimer's says we're all in this together, but we're all in it together. I don't feel like I'm doing anything that anyone else wouldn't do, and I always feel very appreciated from other people, even you reaching out to me. When you reached out to me, I was so happy. I was so grateful, because we speak the same language. And I think, we're part of anyone who's seen it up close. I think we're just, unfortunately, part of a really sad club, and we understand each other, so that's why I continue to try to be as vocal and advocate as I possibly can. For people who don't want to or don't have the energy to,
Yeah, 100%. And so if before we wrap up, maybe you can just kind of let people know, especially in the Western Mass area, but what are some ways that individuals can get involved? I know for myself, I do some fundraising there's a ride that's coming up in June, but then also the Walk to End Alzheimer's. There's always local events, but maybe you can kind of tell people how they can get involved, either with a walk or through advocacy.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing I would suggest is think about where you want to contribute, in what capacity, and then think about how much time you have, and there's no right or wrong answer to that. I think some people aren't huge fans of fundraising. I am one of those people, but I do it anyway. So then advocacy might be better for you, which is a hugely impactful way to contribute to the cause. And to do that, really just you can contact the Alzheimer's Association, look at their website. They're always looking for new volunteers, and they're so amazing to work with. I think especially because, they know what we've all been through. So there's never any pressure, to
and they can help direct people in a variety of different ways, right? It's a great way to just direct people to their local chapter, right? And kind of go from there.
Exactly. I think so. And then, that's even just doing that, you're helping. There's no one size fits all answer in terms of how you can contribute to the fight to end Alzheimer's, but even just wanting to is really all you need. There's always something you can do, whether it be a walk or advocacy or rides or
and this year's Pioneer Valley Walk is in September, right? September 26th.
Yes. Yep. Sunday,
Excellent.
September 26th. And everyone should go to that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And just so we can, I'll bring up my flower. Okay. This is, so these are the flowers that they hand out at all of the walks. Mine gets a little muted with my background. But, it's for all of the individuals that are represented. It's for, people that are still with us. It's for people, that have passed. And so, if you or anybody that has Alzheimer's, I think whether it's Alzheimer's or anything else, just giving people a little bit of breathing room and a little understanding goes a long way for a lot of people, because we're all dealing with something. And so yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks, Julie. I really appreciate you joining us this morning. It was amazing for you to, not just share your story, but how you've kind of not just obviously moved through that, but adjusted your life, have found this new, purpose and passion for yourself that, again, who knows where these things are going to come from, but embracing them and then moving with them when they feel right does amazing things. And so thank you for all that you do with the Alzheimer's Association.